Hello, this is Miss Schrader. We are going to be watching a short video about Native American earthen mounds. My students, you need to have out a piece of paper and something to write with. You want to take some notes, and when you're done, you're going to be writing me 5 sentences about what you found interesting, important, educational. Amongst the things I'm going to be grading, along with the 5 sentences and that they are factually based, is your introductory statement. You should be saying something such as, Native American Indian mounds show that the early people of America had advanced cultures. All right, let's get started. All right, here are some facts that you can use for your 5 facts if you want to. There will be other things available as we go along, but the mounds were built between 3,500 BCE, that's before the current era, and 1750 CE, that's current era. You can also think of these as before Christ and after Christ, things like that. They were built in the eastern and midwestern parts of the United States. There are over 1,000 known mounds. A lot of mounds have been destroyed over the years. Farmers found them inconvenient and would plow them under, things like that. There are 3 different types of mounds. Burial mounds, in which they bury the dead. Ceremonial mounds, which are used for religious purposes. And effigy mounds, which are normally built to please the gods. One of the largest of these mounds is Monk's Mound in Cahokia, near Collinsville, Illinois. This is a ceremonial mound, and Cahokia is a UNESCO site chosen by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization for having cultural, historical, scientific, and other significant importance, and it's being protected by the government. There's a site at Watson Brake in Louisiana, which is considered one of the oldest sites at 5,400 years old, and one of the largest ones is the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, and we are going to be looking at all of these as well as a few others. Now this is a map showing you the sites of most of the Indian mounds in the United States. As you can see, they're in the eastern and midwestern part of the United States. And I mentioned earlier that some of these sites have been destroyed. As Europeans came in and European Americans moved into these areas, a lot of them were farmers, and a lot of them found that these sites just were not practical and convenient for them, and they literally would plow some of them over. Most of those that have been protected by scientific groups. Today, a lot of them are being owned by state parks and state governments, national governments, and they're being intentionally preserved. But in the past, a lot of them were destroyed. In fact, one person who is known to have destroyed an earthen mound is Thomas Jefferson, who became the 3rd president of the United States. He owned a large tract of land in Virginia, and he was aware of a mound on his property, and being a scientific sort of man, he was interested in finding out what was in this Indian mound. So he had it dug up. It turns out that it was a burial mound. There were the bodies of some 42 people, men, women, and children, buried there from hundreds of years before. He, being a scientific gentleman, kept detailed notes about what he found and suggested that perhaps these people might be the lost tribes of Israel, which of course we know now they're not. They weren't. They're simply local Native American tribes. And here we have a picture done at the time showing the destruction of one of these burial mounds. You can see that they've actually sort of sliced it open, and the artist is showing where everything was found. Along with dead bodies, there were grave goods, jewelry, pottery, and things like that to be buried with the dead. One could think of these as city cemeteries. That's how they were used. And this is another example of a mound that was dug into. The stones and the gate, these were put in by modern European Americans as a tourist item so that people could get into them. But the mound had been dug into and the items inside removed. And if you're curious as to how a mound would be made, well, the Indians would simply take baskets of dirt and pile the dirt on top of itself until they made a man-made hill. Now this is Monk's Mound, which is a Cahokia site near Collinsville, Illinois. It is the largest known Indian mound. It is 955 feet high, built between 900 and 955 CE, that's current era. It is a ceremonial mound, so it was built for the purpose of having ceremonies, and the lowest area would have been the area where the people lived. The people who lived here are today referred to as the Mississippian culture. And you have to think about how necessary it was to have an organized culture in order to build something this large, and some of the elaborate burial mounds that they built. They would need to have a government structure. They would have needed to have people who were in charge. They would have needed to have enough food in order to have people doing this and not growing or finding food. And this is an artist's rendition of what they think they looked like. Obviously, this would have been an area where a lot of people lived. They would have been using this as a ceremony to keep people under control. Today, as I've mentioned, Cahokia is a UNESCO site. It is protected, and tourists are allowed to go and visit it. This is Watson Brake Mound near Monroe, Louisiana, and it is considered to be one of the oldest mounds at 5,400 years old. This mound actually was not discovered until the 1990s. An explorer wandering around in the area found it and brought in some archaeologists. It is on private property, and the private property is owned by a large number of people whose family have owned this land for about 50 years, and so it cannot be sold without the permission of everybody, and people are not agreeing, and so it's nearly impossible to visit it. You have to get the permission of about 8 or 9 different people to go and visit this site. Now, my favorite types of mounds are the effigy ones, the ones that are built for the gods. And here you see the longest earthen mound that we are aware of. This is called the Great Serpent Mound, and you can see that it is shaped like a serpent that has something in his mouth, either an egg or a frog. They're not really certain. This is near Chillicothe, Ohio, and it is in a state park. It was built around 1000 to 1750 AD, and they believe this was built by what they call the Fort Ancient culture, and so it would have been a local culture. And the thing with these effigy mounds, in order to see them really well, you have to be high above them, presumably the way the gods would. This one has a tall tower built so that you can climb up and take a look. But yeah, the only people who really would have gotten a good view would have been the gods. And here we have a drawing of it. It's a little bit more abstract, but you can get an idea of what it looks like. And this is another effigy mound. This is called the Marching Bears. This is in northeastern Iowa. The chalk outlines, they don't have those there anymore, so they basically, what they do is they don't mow the grass on top of the bears, and you can walk around them and kind of get the shape from there. While digging through an earthen mound, things would have been discovered. This is a mica serpent found in one of the Hopewell sites, which is near the Great Serpent Mound. Mica is a type of stone. These items would have been relatively small, so that if they aren't buried with someone, they can be carried if the group has decided to move someplace else. This is a figurine made of quartz. They are referring to it as being from Spiro Mound in the Mississippian culture, so probably closer to Cahokia. Once again, quite small. Looks like maybe he is playing with a ball of some sort, not really certain. This one is also from Cahokia, so along the Mississippi River somewhere. I took a tour concerning one of these areas once, and somebody asked the tour guide, do people still continue to dig into the mounds? And he said, no, they don't dig into the mounds, they dig into the library. So nowadays, if you're doing research, you're not allowed to dig into the mounds. You just have to find out what's in the library. So this has been a discussion of Native American earthen mounds of the eastern and midwestern part of the United States. My students, you should be using your notes to write 5 sentences about what you found interesting, educational, important. Remember, along with grading your 5 sentences, I'm going to be specifically looking at your introductory sentence, so make sure you have a good one. Anybody else who is watching this, I hope you found it enjoyable.